Catching my wife with my lawyer hurt, but hearing my son say, "You're pathetic, Dad, she deserves better," destroyed me. 3 months later, they'd stolen my $2, 8 million company, and my home, thinking they'd crushed a broken old man. They were dead wrong. Now let me tell you how losing everything led me to discover something that changed my life forever. I want to know where in the world you're hearing this story from. Comment your location and the time right now, because what I'm about to share about family betrayal and hidden strength might just change how you see your own struggles. I'm Rowan Creed, 55 years old, and for 30 years I built what I thought was an empire. Creed Oil Services started in a rented warehouse on the outskirts of Houston back in 1994. I had a business degree, $15,000 from my late father, and a pregnant girlfriend named Diana who believed in my dreams. By 2024, we were pulling in $2.8 million annually, 37 employees servicing half the independent oil operations between Houston and Beaumont. The success bought us a 6-bedroom colonial in River Oaks, Diana's Mercedes, and Asher's Rice University education in petroleum engineering. But success demands sacrifice, and I was about to learn the true cost. The photo on my desk showed my grandfather Charles in oil-stained coveralls, grinning beside a derrick in 1969. Charles Creed, the wildcatter who taught me that Texas oil was liquid gold, and a man's word was his bond. He'd been gone since I was 12, but his weathered face reminded me daily that everything worth having required hard work. Diana had evolved from my high school sweetheart into one of Houston's top real estate agents. Smart, beautiful, ambitious, she networked at country club events and charity galas, building connections that brought us several major contracts. While she was socializing and I was working 16-hour days, our son Asher was growing up without us. Little league games missed for emergency service calls. School plays where my seat stayed empty because rigs went down. His Rice graduation where I arrived late in work boots because a pipeline burst in Katy. Each missed moment built walls between us until Asher looked at me like a stranger. Last Tuesday should have been different. Asher had just made senior engineer at Chevron, youngest in his department. Diana planned a celebration dinner at home. I promised to be there by 7. At 8:15, I walked through the door to find them finishing dessert in silence. "Dad, you missed it again," Asher said without looking up. His voice carried familiar disappointment. "Son, I'm sorry. The Brennan account had an emergency." "There's always an emergency." Diana's wine glass hit the table hard. 30 years, Rowan. 30 years of emergencies that matter more than your family. I tried explaining about contracts, responsibilities, building something lasting. Asher shook his head. "You know what, Dad? I used to make excuses for you. Tell friends you were working hard for us. But Mom's right." He stood up chair, scraping hardwood. "You didn't miss my childhood because you had to. You missed it because you chose to." The words hit like a physical blow. "Asher, that's not fair." "Fair what's not fair is having a father who cares more about oil rigs than his own son." Diana stood too, face flushed with wine and accumulated resentment. "I can't keep pretending this marriage still works, Rowan. I won't." She walked out of that dining room, and something in her voice told me this wasn't just about dinner anymore. Diana's words from that dinner kept echoing in my head for days. "I can't keep pretending this marriage still works." There was something final in her voice, something that made me start noticing things I'd been too busy to see. The late-night phone calls she'd take in the other room. The new jewelry I hadn't bought her. The way she'd started dressing up for client meetings that ran well into the evening. Tuesday afternoon, when she said she'd be showing properties in River Oaks, I decided to come home early and surprise her with lunch. The black Mercedes in my driveway told me everything I needed to know. I recognized that car, Theodore Manning, Houston's most ruthless corporate attorney. I'd seen it at country club events, always surrounded by admiring socialites and ambitious wives. My grandfather Charles used to say, "Always watch for the signs, boy. Oil wells give warnings before they blow." I should have been watching the signs in my own home. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside, too quiet with an electric tension that made my skin crawl. The bedroom door was closed, something Diana never did during the day. I stood in the hallway listening to sounds that would replay in my nightmares. Not just the obvious sounds, but comfortable laughter between two people who'd clearly been doing this for a long time. I walked back downstairs and sat at my kitchen table, staring at Asher's celebration cake, the dinner I'd missed the moment everything started unraveling. 20 minutes later, Theodore walked down my stairs, adjusting his Italian suit like he owned the place. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour and made judges laugh at his jokes. He stopped when he saw me, but didn't look surprised. Just smiled, that predatory smile lawyer's perfect in law school. Rowan, this is awkward. Diana appeared behind him in the silk robe I'd bought her last Christmas. No shame, no guilt, just defiance. How long? I asked. Does it matter? She poured herself coffee like this was just another Tuesday. This is what happens when you choose work over family, Rowan. Smart women find what they need elsewhere. We can work this out. Counseling, therapy. Work it out. Theodore laughed. Rowan, you still don't get it. This isn't a rough patch. This is an ending. Asher's truck rumbled into the driveway. My heart lifted, finally someone on my side. My son would see this betrayal for what it was. Asher walked through the door, surveyed the scene with complete indifference, and shrugged. So you know now. The casual tone hit me like ice water. Asher, your mother is cheating. Yeah, so... He grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped it open. What did you expect? You've been married to your job for 26 years. Mom deserves someone who actually pays attention to her. This is adultery, son. This is wrong. Asher took a long drink, studying me like I was something pathetic. What's wrong is a husband who misses his own son's promotion dinner. What's wrong is a father who's never been to a single important moment in my life. His voice was flat, emotionless. Theodore's been more present in our lives these past 2 years than you've been in 2 decades. Diana moved to Asher's side, and he put his arm around her shoulders protectively. You knew about this, I whispered. Of course I knew. Mom needed someone to talk to about her dead marriage. Asher's smile was cruel. I encouraged her. Told her she deserved better than a workaholic who treats his family like inconveniences. Theodore checked his Rolex. This has been illuminating, but we have dinner reservations. He looked at me without an ounce of sympathy. Some storms you just can't weather, Rowan. Smart men learn when to get out of the rain. They walked out together, my wife, my son's blessing, and the lawyer, who'd just declared war on everything I'd built. Theodore Manning hadn't been bluffing about war. 3 days after walking out with my wife, the first shot was fired at my professional reputation. The divorce papers arrived during our weekly staff meeting, delivered by a process server who walked into our conference room like he owned the place. 25 employees watched as I was handed documents that would destroy everything we'd created together. Rowan Creed, you've been served. The papers weren't just about ending a marriage. They were a blueprint for systematic destruction. Theodore accused me of financial manipulation, hidden assets, emotional abuse, and abandonment. Every claim was a lie, but in family court perception often mattered more than truth. Judge Harrison had a reputation for fairness throughout Harris County. What I didn't know was that Theodore had been contributing to his re-election campaigns for 15 years. Your Honor. Theodore began with practiced authority. My client has suffered 22 years of systematic emotional abuse. Mr. Creed has prioritized business over family, creating a hostile environment that damaged both my client and their son. Paul Mitchell. My attorney was outgunned from the start. These accusations are baseless, Your Honor. Mr. Creed built his company to provide for his family. Theodore's theatrical laugh filled the courtroom. We have testimony proving otherwise. Asher took the stand wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before. He didn't look at me once. Mr. Foster, can you describe your relationship with your father? Asher's voice was clear, emotionless. My father was never present. He missed every important moment of my childhood school plays, baseball games, graduation. Work always came first. He paused for effect. My mother tried to hold our family together while he built his empire. She deserves compensation for 22 years of being married to a ghost. Did you witness emotional abuse? Constant neglect is emotional abuse. Making your wife feel invisible is emotional abuse. Treating your son like an inconvenience is emotional abuse. Paul's cross-examination was useless. Asher answered every question with cold precision, painting me as a monster who destroyed his family through selfishness. The forensic accountant Theodore brought was his cousin, discovered too late. He testified I'd been hiding money in offshore accounts that didn't exist, systematically undervaluing company assets. Every denial cost me more in legal fees. Judge Harrison's ruling was swift and brutal. The business had to be sold immediately during an industry downturn valued at only $1.8 million instead of its true worth. Diana received the house worth $800,000, 3 years alimony, and most liquid assets. When the gavel fell, I'd lost everything. 30 years of work reduced to $300,000 in Theodore Manning's rigged game. Paul caught up with me in the parking lot. Rowan, I'm sorry. I've never seen anything like this. Theodore had everything planned from the beginning. I stood beside my pickup truck, the only asset they'd let me keep, watching my former life disappear into legal documents and court orders. The war was over and I'd lost everything that mattered. The war might have been over, but living with the consequences was a daily battle I wasn't winning. 3 months later, I was eating ramen noodles in an $800 apartment, watching strangers run the company I'd built from nothing. The place smelled like mildew and defeat, with paper-thin walls that let me hear every life falling apart around me. My new reality was a studio on Houston's east side, 40 minutes from the life I used to know. The hardest part wasn't the poverty, it was the invisibility. People I'd known for years would cross the street when they saw me coming. Former employees found urgent business elsewhere when I walked into stores. Country club members looked right through me like I was a ghost. Tommy, my own brother, had to keep his distance. Diana had kept him on at the company, and he needed his job. We met once at a highway rest stop like criminals. "I'm sorry, Rowan," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "She's got everyone convinced you're planning something. If she finds out I'm talking to you, I'm gone." Even my own blood had to treat me like a pariah. The local business journal twisted the knife deeper. Asher on the cover, wearing a tailored suit, with the headline, "Young Visionary Takes Over Family Empire." Alkis, the article, painted him as a brilliant engineer who'd rescued the company from his father's outdated management style. They'd rebranded it Foster Oil Services, my name erased completely. Diana and Theodore weren't hiding anymore either. Society page photos showed them at charity galas. Diana glowing with happiness I hadn't seen in years, while Theodore worked rooms like he owned them. My bank account held exactly $437. The court garnished 70% of my part-time warehouse wages for alimony, based on my previous income, not current reality. Most days I sat staring at water-stained ceilings, wondering how it had all gone so wrong so fast. The silence was the worst part. No phone calls, no meetings, no decisions. Just endless hours replaying every mistake, every missed dinner, every time I'd chosen work over family. I was sorting through my father's belongings, looking for anything valuable to sell when I found Charles's old toolbox buried under winter coats. The metal was rusted but solid, filled with wrenches and gauges from his wildcatting days. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a manila envelope marked "Important Papers." Inside were old documents and a yellowed receipt from Houston Self-Storage, dated 1973. Unit 47 paid through 2025. I'd completely forgotten about it. After Charles died when I was 12, Dad had stored his things away. The monthly payments were automatically deducted from an old account so small we'd never noticed. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Maybe there was something in that storage unit worth selling. Maybe Charles had left behind tools or equipment that could help me get back on my feet. I drove across town in my beat-up pickup to the storage facility, rows of metal units under the Texas sun holding forgotten pieces of people's lives. Unit 47 sat at the end of a long row, secured with a heavy padlock that looked older than my marriage. I stood there holding the rusty key, wondering what my grandfather had thought was important enough to preserve for 50 years. Inside my grandfather's storage unit, beneath decades of accumulated dust, was a shoebox that would change everything. The unit was packed with furniture covered in yellowed sheets, boxes of Christmas decorations, and the memories of a man who'd survived the Great Depression. Charles's voice echoed in my memory. "Always thinking ahead, Rowan. That's how a man survives." I started with obvious items, tools that might have value, old furniture to sell. But the personal items stopped me cold. Photo albums from his wildcatting days, letters from my grandmother, a Purple Heart from Korea I'd never known existed. In the back corner, wrapped in an old army blanket, was a metal filing cabinet organized with military precision. The shoebox sat on top, marked in Charles's careful handwriting, "For Rowan's emergency." Inside were yellowed bank documents dating back to 1969. Account numbers, deposit slips, correspondence with First National Trust. At the bottom was a savings passbook with my name printed across the cover. Raymond Rowan Creed. Account opened January 15th, 1969. Initial deposit $50,000. $50,000 in 1969 was serious money, more than most people made in 2 years. How had a wildcatter saved that much? I drove to the downtown Chase branch that had absorbed First National through decades of mergers. The teller, Patricia, looked at the ancient passbook like I'd handed her a museum artifact. "Sir, this account is from 1969. I'm not sure our system can access records that old." She typed again. Her expression shifted from confusion to surprise. "Let me get my manager." Kevin Wallace looked like he'd seen everything in 30 years of banking, but his face suggested he hadn't seen this. "Mr. Creed, we need to discuss this privately." His mahogany office felt formal, intimidating. He placed the passbook on his desk carefully. "This is extraordinary. Your grandfather established what was called a long-term growth account, a product First National offered briefly in the late 60s. He pulled out a calculator, making quick notes. The account was structured with compound interest at 6.8% annually locked for 45 years minimum. Through every bank merger, this rate was honored as contractual obligation. My mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" Wallace turned his monitor toward me. The number didn't make sense at first. I blinked, counted digits, blinked again. $1,647,382. "That's impossible," I whispered. $50,000 at 6.8% compound interest over 55 years, Mr. Creed. Your grandfather understood something most people never grasp: the power of time and patience. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. After months of eating ramen and counting pennies, I was staring at more money than I'd lost in the divorce. "This is really mine? No mistake." "No mistake. But, Mr. Creed, we need to schedule another meeting. There are additional items we need to discuss regarding your grandfather's arrangements." I walked out of that bank a different man, not just because of the money, but because I finally understood what Charles had been trying to teach me. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. The next morning, Kevin Wallace spread out documents that made my grandfather look like a financial genius. I'd barely slept, my mind spinning with the reality of $1.6 million. But as Wallace opened a thick folder marked Investment Portfolio, I realized the savings account was just the beginning. Your grandfather was more sophisticated than most people understood. Wallace began pulling out stock certificates, yellowed with age. In 1970, he made what appeared to be a simple investment decision that turned out to be extraordinary. The documents showed Charles had taken $30,000, a massive sum for a wildcatter, in 1970, and purchased Exxon stock. Not just any oil stock, but Exxon specifically, right as the company was positioning itself to dominate the energy sector for decades. Your grandfather's timing was perfect. He invested just before the oil crisis of the 70s, when energy stocks exploded. But more importantly, he held on through every market crash, every recession, reinvesting dividends automatically. Wallace pulled up a portfolio summary on his computer, with stock splits and dividend reinvestment over 54 years. That $30,000 investment is now worth $3.2 million. I had to sit down before I fell down. Total inheritance. $4.8 million, Mr. Creed. The number hit me like a physical force. 3 months ago I'd been worth nearly $3 million. Now I had more than I'd ever dreamed possible. "There's also this," Wallace said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Charles's careful script. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in my grandfather's handwriting, was a letter that seemed to speak directly to my soul. "Dear Rowan, if you're reading this, life has knocked you down hard. I don't know what form it will take: business failure, family betrayal, or both. But I know it will come, because it comes for every man who builds something worth taking. I was a simple wildcatter who learned 3 truths. Money hidden can't be stolen. Time multiplies everything good and bad. And when wolves show their teeth, a smart man waits for the right moment to bite back. This money isn't just inheritance, it's ammunition. Use it wisely. Trust your instincts, not just your heart. The oil business taught me that pressure creates diamonds, but only if you can withstand the heat long enough. I chose Exxon because I understood oil, and I understood that Texas black gold would outlast every fashion, every trend, every economic cycle. Some investments are about getting rich quick. This investment was about getting even when it mattered most. Don't let them see all your cards, Rowan. Never let them see all your cards. Your grandfather, Charles Creed. P.S. That boy of yours will come around when he sees what real strength looks like. Sometimes a man has to lose everything to find out who he really is. I read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my understanding. Charles hadn't just left me money. He'd left me a strategy. He'd somehow known that someday I'd need more than financial security. I'd need the power to fight back. Your grandfather was quite the strategist, Wallace observed. He structured everything to mature when you turned 55. probably figuring that's when a man faces his greatest challenges. I thought about Diana's betrayal, Asher's cruelty, Theodore Manning's arrogance. They'd all underestimated me because they'd only seen what I'd shown them, a hard-working man who played by the rules. They had no idea what Charles Creed had taught his grandson about patience, timing, and the art of the long game. Mr. Wallace, I'm going to need recommendations for the best attorneys and financial advisors in Houston. Money's no object. He smiled knowingly. I take it you're planning some changes. I folded Charles's letter carefully and put it in my jacket pocket right over my heart. Charles gave me more than money. He gave me a second chance at justice. Charles had given me more than money. He'd given me the power to fight back. But power without strategy is just expensive revenge. I needed someone who understood how to destroy Theodore Manning's world as systematically as he'd destroyed mine. Arthur Blackstone was Theodore Manning's former mentor, and when I offered him $500,000 to take down his protege, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. His law office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Houston. Arthur himself was 75, silver-haired, and moved like a shark who'd been circling the same waters for decades. "So you're the oil man Theodore screwed over," Arthur said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Heard about your case. Sloppy work even for him. You know about it." Arthur poured himself bourbon from a crystal decanter, didn't offer me any. "Theodore was my star pupil 15 years ago. Taught him everything he knows about destroying people in family court. He took a sip studying me. Problem is, the little bastard forgot who taught him those tricks. Will you take the case? Take it, Rowan. I've been praying for someone like you to walk through that door." Arthur's smile was predatory. "Theodore thinks he's untouchable because he learned from the best. Time to remind him that the best is still better." "What do you need from me?" "Nothing but money and patience. I'm going to tear apart his life piece by piece, starting with that corrupt judge he's been bribing for years." Within 48 hours, Arthur had assembled a team that made Theodore's operation look amateur. The investigation moved with surgical precision, and within a week we had evidence that would have made federal prosecutors weep. Judge Harrison and Theodore's corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. 15 years of kickback schemes, with my divorce just their latest victim. Diana's affair was a 2-year campaign coordinated with Theodore from the beginning, but Arthur's revelation about Asher changed everything. "Your boy wasn't lying," Arthur said, sliding fabricated bank statements across his desk. "Diana showed him these offshore accounts, secret investments, phantom partnerships. She convinced him you were stealing from the family." I stared at the perfect forgeries. She manipulated him. Like a master puppeteer, fed his resentment, made him feel like a victim. By the time he testified, he genuinely believed you were the villain. Arthur leaned back in his chair. "Theodore's good, but he's not that good. This level of psychological manipulation, that's all Diana." The forensic accounting revealed Theodore's complete fraud. Every piece of evidence fabricated, every accusation false. But Arthur's masterstroke was connecting it to a 15-year pattern of similar cases. "We're not just talking about your divorce anymore," Arthur announced, pulling up FBI contact information. "This is racketeering, conspiracy. Theodore Manning isn't just corrupt, he's running a criminal enterprise. Special Agent Nicole Parker had been building cases against judicial corruption for years. Our evidence gave her everything she needed to bring down the entire operation." Arthur spread the complete file across his desk. 15 years of corruption laid out like a roadmap to federal prison. "We don't just win this case," Arthur declared, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "We destroy them all." I thought about Charles's letter, his advice about timing and patience. The old wildcatter had been right about waiting for the right moment. "Tomorrow morning, Theodore Manning will learn what happens when you steal from a wildcatter's grandson." The wildcatter's grandson had learned his lessons well. At 9 a.m., FBI agents walked Theodore Manning out of his office in handcuffs. By evening, my son was sobbing at my apartment door. The morning started with Arthur's phone call. "It's done." Nicole Parker and her team moved at dawn. Theodore, Judge Harrison, and 3 other attorneys in their network. 15 years of corruption all coming down at once. I watched the local news from my $800 apartment, seeing Theodore Manning, the man who destroyed my life with such arrogance, being led away in federal custody. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Judge Harrison was arrested 2 hours later at his River Oaks mansion. The footage showed FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence while his neighbors watched in shock. 15 years of kickbacks, campaign contributions, and offshore accounts, all documented with the precision Arthur's team had promised. By noon, the court had reversed every ruling from my divorce case. Assets where unfrozen property was returned, and the forced sale of my company was declared null and void. Diana's carefully constructed victory crumbled in a matter of hours. She called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. The local news ran the story continuously. Prominent divorce attorney and judge arrested in corruption scandal. They showed photos of Theodore's other victims, wealthy men who lost everything in suspicious divorce rulings over the past decade. My case wasn't unique. It was just the latest in a pattern of systematic theft. Diana's panic was visible even through the television screen. Reporters caught her leaving Theodore's law firm, her face pale and drawn, refusing to answer questions about her role in the conspiracy. She'd gone from triumphant ex-wife to potential criminal defendant in less than 12 hours. But it was Asher's reaction that mattered most. At 8 p.m., I heard a knock on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw my son standing in the hallway, still wearing his work clothes, his face streaked with tears. "Dad!" His voice cracked like a 12-year-old's. I opened the door, and Asher collapsed against the frame, his body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from his soul. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry." He could barely speak through the tears. "She showed me bank statements, offshore accounts, fake documents. Made me believe you were stealing from us, hiding money while we struggled." I stood there watching my son, the young man who'd testified against me, who'd called me a ghost, who'd encouraged his mother's affair break apart in my doorway. "She said you had millions hidden away, that you were planning to leave us with nothing." Asher's words tumbled out between sobs. I believed her. I wanted to believe her because it was easier than admitting I'd been a terrible son. "Asher, no, let me finish." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I was angry about the missed games, the empty seats at graduation. All those times work came first. But instead of talking to you, I let her poison me against you. I helped destroy an innocent man because I was too proud to admit I missed my father." The hallway was quiet except for Asher's ragged breathing. I thought about Charles's letter, his words about pressure, creating diamonds, about boys coming around when they see real strength. "She manipulated you, son. Diana played on your hurt, used it as a weapon against both of us. That doesn't excuse what I did. I testified against you. I called you abusive. I helped them steal everything you'd built." Asher wiped his face with his sleeve. "How can you even look at me?" I saw Charles's face in my memory. Weathered hands teaching a 12-year-old boy about patience and forgiveness. Some lessons take decades to understand. Because you're my son and we both got played by experts. The question isn't how we got here, it's what we do now. Asher stepped into my apartment, looking around at the sparse furniture and water-stained walls. "Dad, I want to make this right. I want to learn who you really are, not who I thought you were." I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of 26 years of missed connections and misunderstood intentions. "Son, we have a lot of work to do to fix this." 1 year after the arrests, I stood in the Charles Creed Financial Education Center, watching Asher teach a young father about compound interest, and finally understood my grandfather's master plan. The community center was a converted warehouse in East Houston where working families learned financial wisdom schools never taught. Every Saturday, we held classes on budgeting, investing, and the patient accumulation of wealth Charles had mastered decades before. Asher stood at the whiteboard explaining how small investments could grow into life-changing money over time. His voice carried conviction now, not the bitter entitlement that had poisoned our relationship. My grandfather started with $50,000 in 1969, Asher told the class. Not because he was rich, but because he understood time was his greatest asset. He didn't need to get rich quick, he needed to get rich right. I watched from the back, remembering the angry young man who testified against me 18 months earlier. That Asher was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that real strength comes from admitting you were wrong. The foundation had helped over 300 families start investment accounts, teaching them what Charles knew instinctively, that wealth wasn't about showing off, but about security, patience, and playing the long game. Theodore Manning was serving 5 years in federal prison, his law license revoked. Judge Harrison got 7 years and lost his pension. Diana worked as a dental receptionist, now living with her sister, driving a 10-year-old Honda. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. I'd bought a modest 3-bedroom house, nothing like our River Oaks mansion. Despite having more money than I'd ever dreamed possible, I lived simply focused on meaningful work. Charles's inheritance wasn't just about financial security. It was about using resources to create something lasting. Dad, Asher said after class as we cleaned up, I've been thinking about what Grandpa Charles wrote, about pressure creating diamonds. What about it? I think he knew losing everything would be the best thing that happened to us. Not because we deserved it, but because we needed it. Asher paused carefully. I needed to lose the entitled kid I was to become the man I wanted to be. Our relationship wasn't perfect. 18 months couldn't erase 26 years of missed connections. But it was real, now built on honesty instead of assumptions, shared purpose instead of resentment. You know what I tell people about our story, Asher continued. My grandfather taught me that patience beats greed every time. The race doesn't always go to the swift. Sometimes it goes to the steady. Oh. I thought about Charles's weathered face in that old photograph, his knowing smile. He'd understood something fundamental. The best hand is the one nobody knows you're holding until you lay it on the table. Your grandfather would be proud, I told Asher. Not because we got rich, but because we learned what wealth really means. Asher nodded, then surprised me. I'm proud to be a Creed dad. Proud to carry on what Grandpa Charles started. As we locked up and walked to our cars, I realized Charles's greatest gift hadn't been money at all. It had been the lesson that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. The hidden strength isn't in what you show the world. It's in what you keep inside, waiting for the right moment to change everything. Looking back on this betrayal story, I see God's hand in every painful moment. When my wife cheated and my son turned against me, I thought my world had ended. But God was preparing me for something greater, teaching me that sometimes we must lose everything to discover who we really are. My grandfather Charles left me more than money. He left me wisdom that only comes through betrayal stories like ours. Those old grandpa stories he used to tell about patience and timing weren't just tales. They were prophecies preparing me for my darkest hour. He knew that one day I'd need more than financial security. I'd need the strength to rebuild from nothing. The hardest lesson I learned was forgiveness. Asher's betrayal cut deeper than any business loss, but holding on to anger would have poisoned my soul. God works through broken relationships to teach us grace. When I watched my son break down at my door begging for forgiveness, I understood that we'd both been victims of manipulation. These grandpa stories about hidden strength and patient revenge aren't really about getting even, they're about getting better. Charles's inheritance taught me that true wealth isn't what you show the world, but what you keep hidden until the moment is right. Time multiplies everything: investments, wisdom, and the capacity to forgive. The Charles Creed Foundation now helps families avoid the mistakes I made. We teach financial literacy, but more importantly, we teach that success without character is just expensive failure. Every betrayal story we share reminds people that their darkest moment might be preparing them for their greatest victory. Asher and I aren't perfect, but we're real now. Our relationship is built on honesty instead of assumptions, shared purpose instead of resentment. Sometimes God uses our children's rebellion to show us our own failures, then gives us the grace to rebuild together. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family betrayal and forgiveness in the comments below. Please share this with someone who might need to hear that their current struggle could be preparing them for breakthrough. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges. Because sometimes the most powerful victories come from the most unexpected places.